When you picture King Thranduil, the Elvenking of the Woodland Realm, what comes to mind? For millions of people who have only watched the cinematic adaptations, the image is very clear. A cold, arrogant, and incredibly wealthy monarch sitting on a wooden throne, wearing a crown of autumn leaves. A king who cares more about a handful of white gems than the lives of dwarves or men. A leader who would rather lock his doors and hide in his caves than face the growing darkness of the world. He is often painted as the selfish isolationist of Middle-earth, a stark contrast to the wise and benevolent Elrond or the majestic and powerful Galadriel. But this image is not just incomplete, it is fundamentally wrong. If you look past the cinematic drama and dive deep into the actual writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, a completely different character emerges. Thranduil is not a villain, nor is he a coward. He is, in fact, the most deeply traumatized, the most fiercely protective, and arguably the most strategically successful Elven king of the Third Age today. We are going to tear down the misconceptions and look at the brutal, unmagical, and bloody reality of ruling the darkest forest in the world. To understand Thranduil's true greatness, we first have to understand the immense privilege of the other elven rulers. Let's look at Elrond and Galadriel. Why were Rivendell and Lothlorien so beautiful, so peaceful, and so untouched by the decay of the outside world? It was not just because they were great leaders, it was because they were using cheat codes. Galadriel wielded Nenya, the Ring of Water, and Elrond wielded Vilya, the Ring of Air. These rings of power had a very specific function. They preserved things. They stopped the passage of time. They created invisible domes of magical protection around their borders, keeping the shadow of Sauron completely at bay. In LotR, Reeves Folness did not Hansen. It was a perfect, timeless paradise. Now, look at Thranduil. He had no ring of power. He had no magical artifact to protect his borders. He did not have the ancient, world-bending magic of the Noldor High Elves. He ruled over the Silvan Elves, the Wood Elves, who were simpler, less magical, and far more mortal in their vulnerability. Thranduil held his kingdom together not with ancient spells, but with pure grit, strategy, cold steel, and the blood of his people. And look at where his kingdom was located. Ilrinoir Innis Thranduil. Thranduil lived in Greenwood the Great, which eventually became known as Mirkwood, and Mirkwood was not just a spooky forest. It was the absolute front line of the war against evil. Sauron, disguised as the Necromancer, built his fortress of Dol Guldur literally in the southern part of Thranduil's own forest. For over 1,000 years, the Elvenking shared his home with the ultimate Dark Lord, while the other elves were singing songs of ancient days in their protected sanctuaries. Thranduil's people were fighting a daily, endless, grinding war against giant spiders, orcs, and dark magic just to keep their northern borders safe. He held the line. For centuries, he stood as a living shield between the growing darkness of Dol Guldur and the rest of the northern world. And he did it entirely without the help of a magic ring. So, why was he so cold? Why did he refuse to help Thorin Oakenshield? Why did he seem so eager to isolate his people? To answer Set, we have to look at the deepest scar in Thranduil's soul, the Battle of Dagorlad. In the Second Age, during the War of the Last Alliance, Thranduil did not hide. He marched to war alongside his father, King Orifer. They led a massive army of wood elves to the very gates of Mordor to fight Sauron. But Thranduil's father was proud and fused commanded King Gil-galad. Orifer ordered a reckless, premature charge into the Dead Marshes and the plains of Dagorlad. Imagine being Thranduil in that moment. You are a young prince. You watch your father, your king, charge into the shadow. And then you watch as the forces of Mordor completely slaughter him. You watch your friends, your mentors, and the bravest warriors of your realm get butchered in the mud and the ash. Of the massive, glorious army of wood elves that marched out of the forest, only a tiny fraction survived. Thranduil was the one who had to gather the broken, bleeding remnants of his people and lead them on the long, agonizing march back home. He left as a prince with a grand army, and he returned as an orphan king with a shattered population. This is the context that changes everything. When Thranduil looks at Thorin Oakenshield marching to the lonely mountain to wake up a dragon, he doesn't just see a greedy dwarf. He sees the exact same reckless, suicidal pride that got his father and his people butchered thousands of years ago. He is not a coward. He is a survivor suffering from deep, unresolved trauma. He knows the mathematical cost of war. Every elf that dies is a permanent loss to a dying race. He made a silent vow that he would never again sacrifice the blood of his people for the vanity, pride, or gold of outsiders. His isolationism is not arrogance. It is the fierce, protective instinct of a father trying to keep his remaining children alive in a world that is constantly trying to kill them. And what about the gold? What about his supposed obsession with jewels, specifically the white gems? The movies make him look like he suffers from the same dragon sickness as the dwarves. But again, Tolkien's lore provides a much deeper, more tragic explanation. Thranduil is a Sindarin elf. His heritage traces back to the First Age, to the legendary underground kingdom of Doriath, ruled by King Thingol. Doriath was the most beautiful realm in the history of Middle-earth, a place of unimaginable wonder, filled with the light of gems and the songs of the greatest elves. But Doriath was utterly destroyed, and who destroyed it? It wasn't just Morgoth or the forces of darkness. It was the dwarves. The dwarves of Nogrod murdered King Thingol over a necklace holding a Silmaril, sparking a bitter, bloody war that burned Thranduil's ancestral home to the ground. When you understand this, Thranduil's hatred for dwarves makes perfect sense. It is an ancient, cultural blood feud. And his love for gems, it is not simple greed. Thranduil is a survivor of a lost age. He is trying to recreate a tiny echo of the glorious Doriath in his dark, dangerous caves in Mirkwood. He surrounds himself with beauty, with silver and white gems, because it is the only way to remember the light of a world that was destroyed long before men or hobbits even existed. He is a melancholic king clinging to the physical reminders of his lost history. Despite all his trauma, despite his isolationism, when the ultimate test came, Thranduil did not fail. During the War of the Ring, while Aragorn and Gondor were fighting the massive battle at Minas Tirith, a second, equally desperate war was happening in the north. Sauron sent a massive army from Dol Guldur to wipe out the Elves of Mirkwood. This was the battle under the trees. The forest was set on fire. The fighting was brutal, hand-to-hand, and utterly merciless. Thranduil did not run. He did not hide in his caves. He led his people into the burning forest and fought with the fury of a king who refused to lose his home a second time. And he won, against overwhelming odds, without a ring of power. Thranduil crushed the forces of Sauron in the north. If he had failed, if he had been the weak coward people assume he is, Sauron's northern army would have marched right through Mirkwood, wiped out Erebor, and swept down to flank Gondor, destroying the world of men. Thranduil is the unsung hero of the north. He is the pragmatist, the realist. He is the leader who understands that victory is not about charging gloriously into the enemy lines to die a hero's death. Victory is about outlasting your enemy. Victory is about keeping your people alive one more day, one more year, one more century. So the next time you see the Elvenking of the Woodland Realm, do not judge him by his cold exterior. Look at the invisible scars he carries. Look at the kingdom he held together by sheer force of will in the very shadow of the ultimate evil. Elrond and Galadriel were the architects of hope, preserving the magic of the past. But Thranduil was the ultimate survivor. He was the king of the real world, a monarch forged in fire and grief, who stood in the dark and refused to let the shadow take his home.